They say loneliness can drive a person to do unimaginable things. I never believed that. Not until it happened to me. My husband, Mark, is a truck driver. The kind of man who wakes before dawn, kisses his family goodbye, and spends days, sometimes weeks, hauling goods across endless highways. He's strong, reliable, and unwavering in his love for me and our 2 children. We've built a simple, happy life together. Our small suburban home echoes with laughter, and Mark's presence lingers even when he's away. But no one warns you about the silence. The oppressive stillness that follows when the kids are tucked into bed and the house grows dark. I never thought it would weigh so heavily. I filled the days with routines, breakfast, school drop-offs, grocery runs, cleaning, cooking. But at night, when the hum of the television couldn't drown out my thoughts, the emptiness crept in. Mark's best friend Jason was a familiar presence in our lives. They'd grown up together, inseparable since childhood. Whenever Mark was on the road, Jason often stopped by to check in, fix things around the house, or toss a football with the kids. He was like family, warm, funny, always knowing how to make the house feel a little less empty. I never saw it coming. I swear I didn't. It was a Friday night. The kids were asleep, and I had just poured myself a glass of wine when Jason knocked on the door. He was dropping off a package Mark had asked him to bring by. One thing led to another, and soon we were sitting on the couch, reminiscing about old times, laughing over stories I had heard 100 times before. The warmth of the wine mixed with the comfort of familiar company. I felt seen, understood. The walls I hadn't even realized I'd built began to crumble. And then it happened. A lingering touch. A gaze that lasted a moment too long. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped it. But I didn't. The ache of loneliness and the desire to feel wanted consumed me. Jason kissed me and I kissed him back. His lips were warm, urgent, and the world around us seemed to dissolve. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop, to pull away, but I couldn't. My hands found their way to his face, his touch igniting something inside me that I had long since buried. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, nothing else existed. It was reckless, dangerous, and intoxicating. The weight of every lonely night, every suppressed desire, came crashing down in that single forbidden embrace. And Mark, he has no idea. The kiss lingered, refusing to release me from its grasp. His hands brushed down my arms, pulling me closer. I could taste the wine on his lips, feel the heat radiating from his skin. My body responded before my mind could protest. "We should stop," I whispered, though my hands remained tangled in his hair. "I know," Jason murmured against my lips. But he didn't pull away. Neither did I. Every inch of me screamed that this was wrong. Yet I couldn't deny how desperately I craved the touch of someone who wanted me. Someone who saw me. The weight of all the lonely nights, the unanswered needs, bore down on me until resistance became impossible. Jason's mouth traced along my jawline, his breath hot against my skin. I gasped, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. The room spun, not from the wine, but from the rush of reckless desire. The couch creaked beneath us as his hands explored, igniting fires I had tried so long to extinguish. I should have stopped. I should have thought of Mark, of our children, of the life we built. But in that moment none of it mattered. The last shred of hesitation fell away as I surrendered to the hunger. Jason's touch erased every thought, every consequence. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me down the familiar hallway, past framed family photos that silently condemned me. But even they couldn't stop what had already begun. We stumbled into the bedroom, the shadows swallowing us whole. The door closed behind us with a quiet finality, and with it I crossed the line I could never uncross. Morning light seeped through the edges of the curtains, illuminating the wreckage of the night before. The air was thick with the remnants of whispered confessions and tangled sheets. I blinked against the brightness, the pounding in my head a cruel reminder of what I had done. Jason stirred beside me, his arm draped possessively over my waist. The weight of his touch, once intoxicating, now felt unbearable. My heart raced as I carefully slid from beneath him, every movement measured to avoid waking him. The air was cool against my bare skin, the reality of the moment sinking in with every hurried step toward the bathroom. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was tousled, my lips still swollen from the night before. But it was my eyes that betrayed me. They were wild and haunted, reflecting the truth I couldn't deny. What have I done? I gripped the edge of the sink, bile rising in my throat. Every stolen kiss, every desperate gasp replayed in my mind. I had betrayed Mark. I had shattered the trust we had spent years building. The thought of facing him, of looking into those trusting eyes, was unbearable. A soft knock on the door startled me. Sarah. Jason's voice. The same voice that had whispered promises in the dark. I couldn't face him. Not now. I'm fine, I called, forcing strength into my trembling voice. I just need a minute. But a minute wouldn't be enough. Nothing would be enough. I sank to the floor, the cold tiles biting against my skin. And for the first time since it happened, I allowed the guilt to consume me. Jason left without another word, the front door closing softly behind him. The house immediately felt heavier. The laughter of my children echoed from the living room, oblivious to the storm churning inside me. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at the unmade bed. The sheets, tangled and marked by last night's betrayal, served as a brutal reminder. I wanted to strip them away, burn them, erase any trace of what I'd done. But no matter how much I tried, the memory clung to me like a second skin. The hours passed slowly. I cleaned, scrubbed, rearranged the pillows on the couch. Anything to occupy my trembling hands. The weight of guilt sat heavy on my chest. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Every glance at the clock reminded me that Mark would call soon. And when he did, I would have to pretend. The phone rang at 7 p.m. sharp. Right on schedule. Mark's voice, warm and familiar, reached through the line. Hey, sweetheart. Just wanted to hear your voice. How are the kids? I swallowed the lump in my throat. They're good. They miss you. I miss you too, he said softly. Just a few more days and I'll be home. The words twisted the knife deeper. I bit my lip to keep my voice steady. We can't wait. But even as I said it, the truth sat bitter on my tongue. I wanted to tell him, to confess everything, but the fear of losing him paralyzed me. Love you, he whispered. Love you too. After we hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, the walls of our home closing in. I thought of Jason, the way his hands had traced my skin, the heat of his mouth. I had no right to think of him now, but the memories flooded back unrelenting. The next morning I tried to act normal. I packed lunches, braided my daughter's hair, and helped my son tie his shoes. But every smile felt hollow, every laugh forced. I caught my reflection in the window as I waved them off to school. The woman staring back looked the same. But I knew better. Jason's texts came sporadically. Short. Careful. How are you? Thinking about you. I'm sorry. I ignored them. Responding would only pull me deeper into the quicksand I had already stepped in. And yet, a part of me longed for the comfort of his words. I hated myself for it. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Mark called every evening. I listened to stories from the road, laughed at his jokes, and told him how much we missed him. I played the role of the faithful wife with unsettling ease. But the guilt gnawed at me, whispering that the truth would come crashing down. It was only a matter of time. And then the nightmares started. I dreamed of Mark's face twisted in pain, of his voice trembling as he asked me why. I would wake in a cold sweat, my chest heaving. Jason's touch haunted me. The memory of his hands on my skin burned through my dreams. I couldn't escape it. I considered telling someone, a friend, a therapist, but the fear of judgment silenced me. Who could understand? Who would listen without condemning me? The weight was mine to bear alone. Then one evening as I cleared the dinner table, the phone rang. Mark's name lit up the screen. But this time my hands shook as I answered. Hey, sweetheart. Hey, I whispered. There was a pause that sent my heart racing. You okay? He asked, concern dripping from his voice. You sound off. I forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. Just tired. It's been a long day. I get it, he said softly. But hey, I'll be home soon. Then we'll have a proper date night. Just you and me. The thought of facing him, of feeling his arms around me, twisted the knife further. I can't wait, I lied. But the truth lingered. And the silence in my chest grew louder. Mark's return was everything I should have wanted. The hum of his truck in the driveway stirred something deep within me. But it wasn't just excitement, it was fear. The kids squealed with joy as they ran to greet him, their laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. I followed, forcing a smile as he scooped them into his arms, his face lighting up with that familiar, comforting warmth. "There's my beautiful family," he said, pulling me into a firm embrace. His scent, the faint trace of motor oil and the earthiness of long days on the road, flooded my senses. I melted into him, clinging tighter than I meant to. He was here. Safe. Trusting. "I missed you," I whispered against his chest. "Missed you more." That night after we tucked the kids into bed, Mark surprised me with a plan. "Date night," he said, grinning. "I know it's been a while. Just us." I nodded, barely finding my voice. "I'd love that." He took me to our favorite restaurant. Candlelit tables, soft laughter, the hum of low music. Everything was perfect. Mark held my hand across the table, his thumb brushing circles against my skin. He spoke about the road, the odd roadside diners, the late-night truck stops. I laughed at his stories, but every laugh felt like a lie. I could see the pride in his eyes. He was proud of us. Proud of me. When we returned home, his touch lingered. Gentle, certain. He led me to our bedroom and I didn't resist. My body moved with his, responding instinctively, though my mind twisted with guilt. Mark whispered my name, traced every inch of me, and for a fleeting moment, I let myself believe I could bury the truth beneath the warmth of his embrace. But when it was over and he held me tightly, I stared at the ceiling, the darkness around us echoing the storm inside me. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Mark was already up, laughing with the kids in the kitchen. The scent of coffee mingled with the sweet aroma of pancakes. It was a scene I'd always cherished, but now I watched it through different eyes. "I'm taking Josh to the park today," Mark announced, ruffling our son's hair. "Guy time." Josh beamed. "Can we play catch?" "Of course, buddy." I managed a smile, grateful for the momentary reprieve. "Have fun, you two." But the peace I sought didn't last. Hours later, Mark returned, his face unreadable. Josh ran inside, kicking off his shoes and talking excitedly about their day. Mark listened, nodding, but his gaze was distant. Something was different. I could feel it. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Yeah," Mark said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I knew him too well. That wasn't just exhaustion. There was something beneath the surface, something dark. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. That night, as he kissed me goodnight, I searched his eyes for answers. But Mark didn't falter. He held me close, whispered how much he loved me, and drifted to sleep as though nothing had changed. But as I lay beside him, my heart pounded. Because I knew. He knew. And he wasn't going to confront me. He was going to wait. And that terrified me. Mark's demeanor didn't change in the days that followed. He was attentive, kind, and effortlessly slipped back into the rhythms of our life. But I saw it, the fleeting moments when his smile would falter, the careful way he chose his words. It was as though a part of him was watching me, studying me, and yet he said nothing. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that whatever unease I felt was simply my own guilt eating away at me. But Mark's silence grew louder. Then small things began to happen. Jason called one evening. Mark had just stepped out to grab groceries, and I nearly ignored the ringing phone. But the fear that ignoring Jason would arouse suspicion pushed me to answer. "Hey," Jason's voice was low, hesitant. "Everything okay?" Mark hasn't been answering my calls. I forced a smile into my voice. "He's been busy. You know how it is after a long trip." "Right," Jason replied, but his tone remained wary. "If you hear from him, tell him I need to talk. It's important." After we hung up, the unease gnawed at me. Mark avoiding Jason wasn't like him. I didn't ask about it, though. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. A few days later, Jason's calls became more frequent. He left voicemails, urgent, anxious ones. Then on a quiet afternoon, I overheard Mark on the phone. His voice was calm, almost amused. "That's unfortunate, Jason," he said. "But you should have read the fine print." He hung up without another word, a ghost of a smile lingering on his lips. "Who was that?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Just business," Mark replied smoothly. "Nothing you need to worry about." But I did worry. I began noticing changes. Jason's car wasn't parked in front of his usual spots. I overheard whispers from neighbors about legal troubles. There were rumors, something about failed investments, frozen accounts. And through it all, Mark remained composed, a silent storm gathering beneath his facade. He never lost his temper. He never accused me. But the weight of his presence bore down on me. Every lingering glance, every touch, the knowledge that he knew and yet chose to stay, twisted inside me. And then came the invitation. "I thought we deserved a night out," Mark said one evening, handing me a sleek black card. "A reservation, an upscale hotel bar. Just us." His smile was warm, but something gleamed in his eyes. Anticipation, amusement. My stomach twisted. That night I dressed carefully, the dress he loved most clinging to my skin. Mark held my hand as we walked into the dimly lit lounge. The air buzzed with low conversations and the clinking of glasses. Everything felt normal. Too normal. And then I saw her. She was stunning. A slender brunette in a crimson dress that left little to the imagination. Her laughter rang softly as she stood at the bar. Mark's hand tightened around mine as his eyes flickered toward her. "Old friend?" I asked, my voice brittle. "Something like that," he replied, his lips curving into a knowing smile. I watched as he approached her. Their conversation was brief, effortless. She laughed, touching his arm, her eyes gleaming with interest. My pulse pounded. The room spun. And then Mark returned, a glass of wine in his hand and satisfaction in his eyes. "She'll be joining us later," he said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My heart dropped. I didn't know what was worse, the unbearable weight of my own guilt, or the sinking realization that Mark had just made his first move. And this was only the beginning. The drive home was silent. Mark's fingers tapped idly on the steering wheel, the hum of the engine filling the air. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring past. My thoughts were a whirlwind. He hadn't said a word about the woman in red since we left the bar, but the echo of her laughter still rang in my ears. Mark was toying with me. I knew it now. He was enjoying every moment of my unraveling. The warmth of his hand on my thigh, the occasional glance he gave me, it was all part of the game. But I didn't know how far he would go. The next morning, Jason's name flashed on my phone. I hesitated. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Ignore it. But I couldn't. "Hello. Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Jason's voice was frantic. "My accounts are frozen. The bank's saying I violated the terms of my business loans. I'm completely screwed." I swallowed hard. I don't know. "I'm so sorry, Jason. I think Mark's behind this." He paused, his voice trembling. "He knows, doesn't he?" "I don't know." My voice cracked. "He hasn't said anything. He's just acting like everything is fine." "It's not fine," Jason growled. "He's destroying me." I wanted to tell him to stop calling, to stop involving me. But before I could respond, the call went dead. I stood there, the phone still clutched in my trembling hand. Jason was right. Mark wasn't just punishing him, he was dismantling him. And the worst part? He was just getting started. That night, Mark came home with a bottle of wine. He kissed me softly, his hands lingering just a little too long. "I made reservations," he said. "For us. And a guest." I froze. "A guest?" He smiled. "You remember her. The woman from the bar. Her name's Vanessa. Thought it might be fun." My heart pounded. I wanted to protest, to scream. But Mark's eyes held me in place. He wanted me to refuse. He wanted me to panic. But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "Of course," I whispered, my voice barely steady. The restaurant was dimly lit, the glow of chandeliers casting golden light over the tables. Vanessa was already seated when we arrived, her crimson dress hugging her curves. She greeted Mark with a kiss on the cheek, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I felt like I was suffocating. "You didn't tell me your wife was so stunning," Vanessa purred, her hand lingering on Mark's arm. Mark grinned. "She's full of surprises." The evening dragged on. Vanessa laughed at every joke. Her fingertips brushed over Mark's hand more times than I could count. My wineglass emptied quickly, but even the haze of alcohol couldn't dull the ache in my chest. And then, without warning, Mark's hand slipped beneath the table, resting on Vanessa's thigh. She smiled. I froze. I think we should head upstairs, Mark murmured, his voice low. The suite's ready. My stomach dropped. Upstairs? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We all deserve a little fun, Mark said, his gaze burning into mine. Don't you think? The air was thick with tension. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Vanessa's smile widened, her eyes glinting with anticipation. And in that moment I knew. Mark had no intention of hiding his revenge. He wanted me to watch. To see the very moment he shattered what little was left of my dignity. Shall we? He asked, standing and offering Vanessa his hand. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The trap had been set, and I had nowhere to run. Mark didn't wait for my answer. His hand lingered in the air, waiting for Vanessa to take it. She did, her fingers curling delicately around his. My chest burned, the weight of humiliation crushing down on me. Coming, Sarah? Mark's voice was low, mocking. He was enjoying this every second of it. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. I'll wait here. His smile deepened. Suit yourself. Without another glance, Mark led Vanessa toward the elevators. I watched them go, the gleam of her crimson dress flashing like a warning light. The room buzzed around me, but all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but sit there. But my legs refused to move. Minutes felt like hours. My imagination tormented me, painting vivid pictures of what was happening upstairs. Every laugh that drifted from across the bar felt like it was directed at me. Everyone knew. Everyone had to know. And still I stayed. When Mark finally returned, he walked with a deliberate calm. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. His sleeves were rolled up, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked satisfied, triumphant. Did you enjoy the show? I spat, the venom in my voice barely masking the tremble. He tilted his head. No more than you enjoyed yours. The weight of his words struck me like a slap. He wanted me to feel this. To understand exactly how it felt to watch the person you loved betray you. Mark. My voice softened, desperate. Please, don't. His voice was cold. You made your choice. And now I've made mine. He pulled a key card from his pocket and tossed it on the table. That suite's paid for through the weekend. Do whatever you want. I'm going home. Home. I gasped. To the kids. Our kids, he corrected sharply. And my house. Mark leaned in, his face inches from mine. You're not welcome there anymore. The finality in his voice shattered me. Tears welled in my eyes, but he didn't flinch. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone. Days passed. I tried calling. No answer. Messages went unanswered. I drove to the house once, but Mark didn't let me in. He didn't even speak to me. Just a single text followed. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Jason too had vanished. Mark's plan was flawless. Jason's business was in ruins. His accounts were drained. I later learned Mark had exposed every shady deal Jason had ever touched, ensuring no bank or investor would go near him. Jason had nothing left. Just like me. I deserved this. Every moment of it. But the hardest part? Knowing that Mark's kindness had turned into something far more ruthless. And I had been the one who made him that way. The last I heard, Mark was moving on. Rumors swirled about him seeing someone new. Maybe it was Vanessa. Maybe it wasn't. It didn't matter. The man I once called my husband had won. And I would never forget the price of my betrayal.